Hey everyone, welcome to TutorialsPoint. My name is Faz, and in this video, we are going to cover the basics of HTML, the language that powers the internet. So, what is HTML? HTML stands for Hyper Text Markup Language. It's basically the language used to create websites. Now, within HTML, we have something called elements. Each element has a specific purpose and helps structure our web page. In this course, we will learn about these elements and how to use them to create websites. But how do these websites even show up in our browsers? Well, when you type a website address into your browser like tutorialspoint.com, your browser sends a special message called a request to a computer. This computer is called a server. The server gets your request and sends HTML, CSS and JavaScript files back to your browser. Your browser takes these files and reads them. It reads the HTML to understand the structure of the page, CSS to style it and make it look beautiful, and the JavaScript to add functionality. For CSS and JavaScript, we will have separate videos. Now let's get started with HTML.
So I have opened Visual Studio Code here and I have created a folder called as HTML course. Now the first thing is to create a file. I'll call it index.html. Alright, now why index.html? The thing is, the term index is commonly used for the main file of a website because it serves as the entry point or default page that a web server looks for when someone accesses a website. It's not a hard and fast rule you need to name it index.html, but it is a good practice, right? So we will call this index.html. Now the first thing inside our index.html is going to be our doctype element. Alright, so I'll simply write an angle bracket, and then as you can see, it already gives us a suggestion of doctype HTML and then a closing bracket. Alright, now what does this mean? Basically, this helps browsers to understand the version of HTML we are using. So this doctype HTML tells the browser that we are using HTML5, which is the latest version of HTML. Now after this doctype HTML, the next thing we are going to write is an HTML element. So I'll show you. I'll write angle bracket, then I'll write HTML, and then I'll write a closing angle bracket. Alright, so we will call this as HTML tag. Alright, now tags basically in HTML have an opening and a closing. So this one here is an opening HTML tag. I can also write a closing one. So I'll write angle bracket slash HTML and then again an angle bracket. Now as you can see, this will be called as an opening HTML tag and this will be called as a closing HTML tag. And both of these tags together, that is the opening as well as the closing, both of these tags together will be called as an HTML element, right? Now, what is this HTML element basically? It represents the beginning and end of our HTML file. Now, after this, all other tags will be placed inside this HTML element. All right. One important thing is here in the HTML opening tag, we are going to write something what we call as attribute. Okay, it's a special property given to tags. For example, here I'm going to write lang, which basically stands for language. As you can see here, we have the suggestion helps define the language of an element. So for the language, I'll write equal to, and as you can see inside this, I will write en, which basically stands for English. Now let's say you want to write your HTML document in some other language like French. You will simply write fr, which stands for French. But for our case, we'll just write en, which basically means that this HTML document will be in English language. Now inside this HTML element, we are going to write another element. For every element, there is an opening and a closing tag. So I will write an element called as head. So I'll simply write angle bracket and then I'll write head. And also for the same, I will write a closing tag. So something like this. Now, what is this head element? Now, the head element holds information about metadata of the website. Now, you may ask, what is metadata, right? So let me just quickly open my browser to let you know, guys. Okay, so I'll simply write google.com, and in the Google, we can search of any of the website you want. For example, I will search YouTube. Very simple. As you can see, the search results here indicate a title, YouTube home, and then a brief description, share your videos with friends, family, and world, right? If you just to another something like tutorials point, you will see tutorials point also has this title. We have a brief description of what this website is. All of this data related to the website is called as metadata. So let me just close this for now. Now in this head, all of this metadata is stored. Other types of metadata like title, description as I told you, and also keywords are stored, which are used for SEO purposes, which we will look into shortly, right? For now, the first thing inside the head element is going to be title. So I'll simply write a title tag, an opening title tag, and a closing title tag. Now inside this title tag, we're going to write the title of our index.html file, or basically of our website. So for example, I'll write my website and I'll save it. Now we need to check if all of this is working right. Now one way is to basically open your browser and go to this index.html file, but that is too tiresome. What we are going to do here is we are going to install a very small extension. So right here, click on extensions and here search for live server, hit enter. And as you can see, this extension live server by Ritwik Day, just install it. All right, it will help us launch our server quickly so that we can see our changes. So let me just close it. Let me just close. And as you can see, we have this go live button here. As you can see, it says click to run live server. I'll just click on it and the browser will open. I'll show you shortly something like this. As you can see, the browser has opened. So I have splitted my screen so that we can see changes side by side inside our browser. As you can see here, we talked about this title element. We have written my website in it. And as you can see here, the my website is visible. So basically, this title element is used to represent the title of our web page. After this, outside our head element, but inside our HTML, what we are going to do is we are going to write a body tag. So an opening body tag and then a closing body tag. All right. Now, this body tag defines the visible area of our web page. Inside this body element, we will write the entire content for our website. Okay, now let's start. Very simple. What I'm going to do is I'll start with headings, different types of headings, in fact. So I'll write H1 opening tag and then an H1 closing tag. Now H1 means basically heading of level 1. For example, I'll write here some text. Let's say welcome friends. And I'll save it, and as you can see, it will come here. Now notice this text is bolder and is bigger, right? So this is the level 1 heading in HTML. Similarly, there are 1 to 6 level headings in HTML. All right. Now these different headings help us to structure our web pages. For example, I'll create another heading. I'll call it H2. Now inside I'll write this is H2 heading. Now I'll write a closing H2 tag, something like this. Now once I save it, as you can see, this is H2 heading appears here, and notice this H2 heading is smaller than this welcome friends heading. Let me just write it down for your reference, H1 here, so that you may be able to understand. So this is the H1 heading and this is the H2 heading. Similarly, we have 6 levels of heading. Next, we have an H3 heading. So I'll write this is H3 heading, something like this with the opening and closing tag. Similarly, I will write for all of the H headings, basically from H1 to H6 for you. And as you can see, I have written all the different levels of HTML headings, H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, and H6. And notice here in the web browser, let me just zoom in a bit. As you can see, they have different sizes. Welcome friends is much bigger, then it is a bit smaller, and then so on. Right? So these are the different levels of headings in HTML. Let me zoom out. Now the next element we are going to talk about is the paragraph element. So I'll simply write a P. As you can see, P opening and then a closing tag. Now inside we can write any. So I'll write this is a sample text, for example, and I'll just save it. As you can see, this is a sample text appears here. Now, anytime you need a sample text in VS Code, you can simply write the shortcut LOREM and then any number of words you want. For example, I'll write 20, hit enter, and as you can see, we have these random words. I don't know what language that is. Let me save it, and as you can see, we have here. So basically, this is the paragraph element that is used to represent a block of text or a paragraph on a web page. Very simple and very basic. Now, after the paragraph element, we are going to talk about some more elements. For example, I'll talk about the bold element. Okay. Now, here I'm just going to write another paragraph element. Similarly, in VS Code, you can simply type P and then hit enter it all because it gives you this suggestion. You click on it and you have the paragraph element here. So I'll write simply, this is sample text. Okay, I will save it. As you can see, this is sample text appears here. Now, let's say I want to make this sample word bold. How can we do that in HTML? It's very simple. Now we will wrap this sample tag inside a new tag. Now that tag is going to be a bold tag. And in HTML, we represent this bold tag with B. So I'll simply write angle bracket B and then a closing angle bracket. And then I'll also write a closing tag for the same. Something like this. So I have basically wrapped this sample word inside this bold element. If I basically save it by pressing Ctrl S, as you can see, this is sample text here. Let me zoom in and this sample appears to be bold. Similarly, we also have an italics tag. So let me just write another paragraph. I'll write, hey, everyone, welcome. Just a random text and I'll save it. Now, if I want to italicize this, hey, everyone, I'll wrap it inside an italics tag. Very simple and very similar to bold. I'll write I opening tag and also then AI, which stands for italicize closing tag. I will save it. And as you can see, let me zoom in. Hey, everyone has been italicized. Very simple. So basically, this I element in HTML makes the text appear in an italic font style. Next are some of the very basic tags in HTML. For example, very simple tag is, let me just write another paragraph tag, P, and hit enter. Now inside paragraph, I want to write, let's say, a chemical formula. For example, water itself. A very common is water, and we write water using H2O. Right? If I save it, it will appear here H2O. But as you can see, this 2 is not supposed to be in the same line as H and O, right? It should be as a subscript of the same. Now in HTML, we can use a sub tab or basically a sub tag to create a subscript text. Here, I'll tell you how. So basically, I'm going to wrap this 2 inside a sub tag, something like this, sub, and then we'll close it. So this is the opening sub tag and then a closing sub tag. I'll save it. And as you can see, 2 appears and also this O goes. Why? Because I wrapped this O also. So let me just put it here and save it. And as you can see now, this formula looks perfect. H2O, that stands for water. Similarly, we have another things that are used for superscript. For example, another formula, let me write another paragraph element, is going to be carbon dioxide. We all know the formula. I am assuming you know it. It's CO2. Right? If we save it, as you can see, CO2 is here. But this this 2 right here is supposed to be in the superscript form. So similarly, what we did with the subscript, we can do with superscript. So I'll write an opening SUP tag and then a closing SUP tag. Something like this. Let me zoom it out so that you can see an opening SUP and a closing SUP tag that basically is a superscript element. Let me save it, and as you can see, CO2 appears something like this. Very simple. Okay, so we have talked a lot about elements. We have seen different headings, paragraphs, bold, italicize, superscript, and subscript. Now, one of the important things is when you are learning a new language or any new technology, especially when it comes to programming, you may have heard about comments. For example, here for the headings, if you want to remember what are these, I'm just simply going to write a text so that you can remember things. I'll write different level of headings. Now we can use something called as comments to remember different things inside our code. For the HTML, to write a comment, I am simply, let me just zoom in for you. I'll simply write here just before this different, I'll write an angle bracket and then an exclamation mark, something like this. So this makes the opening of a comment. Now to close this comment, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to here at the end of this different level of headings, I'll write something like this. So this is the closing of a comment. So this is how you write comments in HTML. Another easy thing in VS Code is just delete it. Just delete this. Now you want to comment out, simply you go to this line, you select this line, then you press Ctrl/ and it automatically comments it out for you. Very simple in HTML. So as you can see, I'll similarly write for this one, I'll write this is paragraph element. Now to comment it out, I'll press Ctrl/ and it comments out. If I save it, nothing appears here because these are comments only for our use case. Now next we are going to talk about some separative tags. For example, we have this long paragraph and we want to separate it. Now one of the ways is to simply write a tag, what we call as break the line or break line tag. So I'll write angle bracket BR and then close this bracket. Now some of the tags or elements in HTML only have one tag. So basically these elements are called self-closing tags because they don't require a closing tag. For example, in the paragraph we have this opening and a closing tag here. But for this BR we don't need a closing tag. We only need an opening tag and that is self-sufficient. Now if I save it, note how this line changes. I will save it and as you can see after this word the line has been broken and then this appears in a new line. So this is what BR or break the line tag or element is used for. Another important one, for example, after this headings I want to have a line basically to separate, right? So I will basically write HR. Of course not human resources, but HR means horizontal rule and it is also a self-closing element. So let me just save it and as you can see we have this line, right? Similarly, for example, after this paragraph I want to write another HR and I'll just save it. As you can see we have another horizontal rule. Similarly for this, after this paragraph I'll write another HR and save it and in the bottom we have another horizontal rule. So these are some of the basic elements like BR, which stands for break the line, and then we have HR, which stands for horizontal rule, and both of these elements are self-closing elements. Now next we are going to talk about a very important HTML element, that is the A tag. Now I'll just simply write angle bracket A and then, so this is the opening A tag and then a closing A tag. Now this basically is called the hyperlink element in HTML. Now this A tag is used to create hyperlink, allowing users like you and me to navigate to other web pages, right? Now how do you navigate? I'll simply write click me and I'll save it. And as you can see, this click me appears here, right? But if I click on it, nothing happens. Why? Because we need to provide an attribute, a special property to it. So for the hyperlinks, that is the A element, there is a attribute called as href. All right. So href, which basically means hypertext reference. So basically what are we referencing to? So href equals, and here inside I can write anything. For example, I'll write some website name, let's say tutorialspoint.com. Let me zoom out so that you can see clearly. So an A tag that has an href, which has a value of tutorialspoint.com. If I save it, as you can see, this click me changes to blue color with a underline. Now, if I click on this one, as you can see, it takes me to the Tutorials Point website. Very simple. We can similarly create another one. So I have copy pasted and let me just write here something like google.com. And the text should be go to Google or something like that. Let me save it. And as you can see, google.com, go to Google appears here, but they appear in the same line. We can use a BR tag to break the line, something like this. So I'll save it. And as you can see, go to Google is here. Now, if I click on this, it takes me to the Google, right? Very simple. Now these are A tags in HTML. Now these A tags can also be used to navigate to other web pages of our website itself. For example, here in the Explorer, I'll create a new file and I'll call this file something like about.html. Okay. Now inside this about.html, let's not write anything for now, but I'll just create another link. Let me close the Explorer and I'll write a tag and I will say this should take me to about.html and I'll write about page. Let's save it and let's go back, and here is the about page. If I click on it, it takes me to a blank page because of course inside our about.html we have written nothing for now. Okay, so this is just an example to show you how we can use the A tag in HTML to go to other websites or basically navigate within our own website. Now next up we are going to talk about a very important HTML element, because every web page looks very boring if we only have text. But if we have images, it makes the page interesting. So next we are going to talk about the image element. Alright, now what is an image element? It's very simple. Let's say I want to display some image on my web page. I will simply write a tag and I'll call it IMG. Now, just like I told you about this HR tag, these are self-closing tags. Similarly, this IMG tag is also a self-closing tag. That means we don't need a closing tag for this one. So this is a basically self-closing tag or a self-closing element. Now for this IMG, I'm just going to close it. Now inside this IMG, we need to specify some of the things so that our image is displayed on the screen. Okay, so first thing or the first attribute we are going to write here is the src, which basically means the source. Now equal to, this will be equal to a string. Now for now, let me just go to Google and let's write HTML tutorialsPoint. I just want to have a quick image. Let's go to images and yeah, this one. So let me just open this image and let me just copy image address for now for the example. Now here in the src, I'm going to paste this. Now once I have pasted this, I will save it. If we scroll, as you can see, the image appears on our website. Now, another important thing is I can just simply download it. So let me just save this image. And inside desktop, we have HTML course, and I'll just write HTML image and I'll save it. Okay. Now, if we go here, this HTML image appears. So in my source, I'm just simply going to write HTML image.jpg. If I save it, as you can see, the image appears here. Now this is the first point. Second is we also need to write another attribute, that is alt. Now basically this alt attribute defines an alternative text description of the image. I'll show you what I mean by this. Alternate equal to, I'll write HTML logo, something like this. Now let's save it. Nothing happens, but let's say for any reason, let's say some error in the reason, the image is not able to display. Now let me just save it again, and as you can see, in place of this image, it is showing this alternate text of HTML logo. That is why this alternate text is used here, or basically this alt attribute is used here. So let me just write it back and save it. And as you can see, we have this logo. So let me just separate it by including a horizontal rule, save it, and yeah, it looks much better. Next, we are going to talk about some more important HTML elements. Now, what I'm going to do is, let me just have another horizontal rule here so that we can separate. Yeah, we have the horizontal rule. Now, let me write a tag, let's say a h4 tag, and inside h4, I will write something as lists. Now, how to basically write lists in HTML? Okay, so we have the lists here. Now there are two types of lists in HTML. First is the ordered list and second is the unordered list. Let's talk about the ordered list first. Now the ordered list, we can simply write OL, which basically stands for ordered list. Hit enter and you have an opening and closing ordered list. Now inside this ordered list, we are going to write list item. All right, so list item basically short form LI. So an opening and a closing li tag. And I'll write anything. For example, name of fruits, apple, right? I will write another one, let's say mango. I'll write another one, let's say orange. Let me just save it. And as you can see, we have a list. And as you can see, this list is numbered. This list is ordered with 1, 2, 3. So that is why we call this list as an ordered list. Very simple. Now another type of list is also there. So let me just write here for this H4. I'm just going to write this is an ordered list. Right? So this is an ordered list. Next, we have something called as unordered list. So for that, very simple, unordered list, short form UL, hit enter. This is a UL opening and closing tag. Now inside unordered list, there are going to be list items similar to the ordered list, right? So list items, and we can have anything, I don't know, let's say item 1, and then I'll write item 2, and then I'll write item 3. Once I save it, as you can see, now item 1, item 2, and item 3 appear in bullet points. So these are not numbered or ordered. That is why in HTML they are called as unordered list items. So this was a bit about lists in HTML. So we have ordered list, and let me just copy and paste it for you. We are going to have something called as unordered list. Something like this. So this is an ordered list, and this is an unordered list in HTML. Now moving on, we need to understand when we write HTML code, it's essential to follow certain rules and guidelines to ensure that your web pages work properly and are displayed correctly in web browsers. For that, we have a website. So here in our browser, I'm just going to paste that website. Now this website is validator.w3.org. So hit enter, and it takes you to a website. Now what is this? Now the W3C markup validation service is a tool that checks whether your HTML code meets the standards set by this organization. Now this is a helpful resource for beginners who are learning HTML to ensure that their web pages work correctly and look right in the web browsers. So for example, we are going to validate this index.html file of ours. So simply, we have many options. We can have a URL here, we can upload our HTML file, or we can just validate by direct input. So what I'm going to do is, let me just Control A to copy all of this and press Control C to copy it, and now I'm going to paste it here. Now I'm going to click on check. Once I click on check, it will give us some error. So basically, we can say we have an error here. Now the error is bad value. You can see for our image element, we have written name of the image as HTML space image.jpg. Now basically this website is giving us a suggestion and telling us that it is a bad practice to include spaces in file names, especially in images or any other files that we use in the source attribute. So the best practice here is going to be, we are going to change the name of the file. So instead of HTML image, let me just put something like underscore here and hit enter. And now I'm just going to put that underscore here as well. Now if I save it, our website still works. Now we are going to check again. So let me just go back. Let me just copy and paste it here and click on check. Now once we click on check, let's see. As you can see, document checking completed, no errors or warnings to show. So you can use this website to validate your HTML anytime. Now next, let me just close this. And now we are going to go back, and here in our head tag, I told you earlier that we provide metadata about our website in this head tag. Now I want to talk about here one of the very important metadata that we always need to include whenever you are creating a website. All right. So basically, we are going to use something called as meta tag to give metadata about our website. Now, meta tag is an element that resides within the HTML element. Okay. So I'll simply write here meta. Okay, now the meta, as I told you, just like HR, BR, and image elements, meta is also a self-closing element. So we don't need a closing tag for meta. Okay, now the meta element is actually really important, basically for search engines and SEO related optimizations. For now, we are going to talk about a very important meta element. Now, this meta element represents the character set. So I'll write here CHARSET, which basically means character set, and I'll set it equal to UTF UTF-8. Okay, so basically, now this meta element is an important meta tag in HTML that specifies the character encoding for the web page. UTF-8, which basically means Unicode Transformation 8-bit, is a character encoding standard that can represent almost all characters and symbols from different languages and writing systems. Now, if the character encoding is not specified or is incorrect, right, the browser may misinterpret these characters, leading to incorrect text to display for your website. So this tag is really important. You can learn more about this UTF-8 from the link in the description. So we have completed the basics of HTML tags and elements. Now we will talk about the semantic tags in HTML. So I'm going to close this and we will create a new file, and let's call it semantic.html. All right. Now let me just stop this server, and we don't need to stop it. Let me just start it again. And now here in the URL, instead of this index.html, I'm going to write semantic.html. Hit enter and we have nothing. So we will start with our very basic tags here. Now, what are the basic tags? Let's try to recall. First is the doctype, right? So something like this, doctype HTML. Let me zoom in for you. All right. What is next? Next is our HTML tag. And this HTML tag should have a language attribute that is equal to a string, and we will say EN, which stands for English. Close this tag. We also need a closing tag for it. So I'll write HTML again. All right. What is next? After this, we have a head tag. So I'll write head and hit enter, and we have an opening and a closing head tag. Now inside head tag, I told you earlier, the first tag should always be it's not necessary that these should be in a particular order, but yeah, it's recommended. First is going to be the meta tag that represents the char set equal to UTF-8. Close this one. This is a self-closing tag. Then we talked about the title tag. Let's call it semantic page for now. All right, I will just save it. After this, what is next? All right, so this is it for the head tag. Now we have the body tag. So hit enter and we have a body tag. And for now, let's have a heading, and let's say this is semantic page, and I'll save it, and let's say if it is working or not. Let me just refresh, and as you can see, it says this is a semantic page. If I write here this, and let's say if it changes, yeah, so this is the semantic page. Now let's talk about what do we mean by semantic. Now understand, semantic means to describe something. Semantic elements are basically used to convey meaning of the content they contain. For example, let's go to any website. For example, I'll go to tutorialspoint.com. Very simple website. Okay. Now in tutorialspoint.com, as you can see, this page has a structure, right? First, we have this navbar. It has a menu, login button. We have this logo, search box, and some more navigation links. So this is a navbar. Then as you can see, we have different sections. First section is the start learning with different tutorial links. Then we have another section of build a career with us. And then we have a AI ML technology section. So this web page is basically divided into multiple sections, right? If we move down, as you can see, at the bottom of the page, we have this footer, right? So as you can see, this footer has this logo, some links to other pages of this website, all right, and then we have the social icons, the app download stuff, and other links to other pages on this website. And then a copyright, all rights reserved, etc. So basically, every page on the internet is like this. They have a structure, a navbar, different sections, different content, a footer, a header, right? So why is this structure followed? Because it helps the browser and the search engines understand your website better. Semantic elements contribute to better search engine optimization by helping search engines understand the content and its context more accurately. So we will start using some of the semantic elements. There are many semantic elements. The link for those will be in the description below, but we are going to talk about some of the main semantic elements here. All right, so let us start. First, let me close this page and let me zoom out. So as I told you earlier from the TutorialsPoint website, the first thing we noticed was a header which had a navbar inside. So that's what we are going to do here. Let me just delete this h1 for now, and here I'm going to write an element called as header, an opening tag and a closing header tag. Right now, inside this, what I am going to do is, inside the header tag, what exactly is header tag? It basically represents the navigational content. Okay. Now, inside the header tag, what we are going to do is we are going to have a navbar. For example, I'm going to write a tag. I'll call it nav. All right. Now, inside nav, let's say we have an unordered list. Just like any website, if you see on the internet, they have different links. So I'll write list item, let's say home, and then another will be about, and then another will be contact. If I save it, as you can see, it's here. It's not looking like a navbar for now because we of course need to style it, and we can style it using CSS, which we will learn later on in some other video, not in this one. So this is what it looks like, but a more better option would be to have links here, right? Because navigational content is basically links to the other pages. So we can also have links, for example, a tag, and inside a tag, I will write home. So this becomes home. Similarly, for this one, I'll also write a tag, and this about goes here. And similarly, for this contact, let's have a tag, and this contact goes inside it. Now, for now, we don't have these home, about, we don't have these pages. So let's write a hash for now, which essentially means nothing. So yeah, as you can see, we have these links. All right. So this is I'll just separate it so that you can see it clearly. So what I did essentially is I created a header element which basically represents the navigational content. Inside, I then wrote a nav element. Now basically defines section of navigation links. We can also here have maybe a logo of your website or something, or anything to write. For example, a h1, let's say my website. If I save it, as you can see, we have this my website, something like this. So this will be our header. Let me just separate it with the help of a horizontal rule, as we talked about earlier. Let me save it. So this will be header for our website. Now, after this header, let's go back to tutorialspoint.com to see. So we have this header. It's not very similar to what we have, but yeah, it is almost like a header. It has some navigation links. Next, there is content. So what we are going to do after your header, whatever content, how many sections you want in your website is one thing. We are going to wrap it inside a main tag so that our browser, or basically our search engine, or any search engine out there like Google, will understand that this is the main content of the website. So here, after the HR tag, I'm going to write a main element or a main tag, opening and closing. And now inside this main tag, we can have multiple sections. For example, I'll just write a section tag, and inside the section tag, let's give it some content. I'll write a h2, let's say anything about us maybe, or we can say about us, and then we can have a paragraph tag as well. And inside the paragraph tag, we can have some text. Let's say Lauren 30, hit enter, and we have some random text. Let me save it, and this is just a section of our website which is inside the main element. Understand the hierarchy. You should understand basically we are trying to give a proper structure to our website, and this is very helpful in search engine optimization and website ranking. All right. Similarly, we can have multiple sections, right? For example, I can have another section. Let me just go below and write another section. And this section is going to be, let's say, h3, and it is also very much recommended. For example, you already wrote h1 tag here for your nav link, then you should always write it in order. The next time you write some heading tag, it should be h2, not h1 again, right? So here I wrote h2, and now for the next section I'll write a h3 tag. Or here we can talk about our achievements, for example, or anything, right? Or our goals may be fine, right? And then here we can also have an image. Now we will use this older image that we talked about earlier, the HTML image. So I'm just going to write HTML image, and the alternate text is going to be HTML logo. I'll save it and it should appear here. Let us separate these sections with the help of a horizontal rule again, so that it gives you a proper structure, right? Then what we are going to do is we are going to have some text. So I'm just going to have a paragraph tag, and inside paragraph, let's say lorem 40. So it will have something like this. I'll save it. Let's go down, and as you can see, we have another section. Then we can have multiple things. We can have an ordered list. For example, inside this we will have a list item. All right. So learn HTML, and we can say practice HTML, and so on. I'm just trying to show you that how you should structure a web page properly so that it is ranked better on search engines like Google, right? So we can have different sections here. All right. We can also have a lot of other semantic tags. For example, let's say I want to write an article. So after this section, what I am going to do is basically I'll write an article tag. All right. Now inside article, I'll write some heading, let's say h4, and I'll say learning HTML. All right. Now for this part, let's have something, I don't know, let's have this image again. I'll just give it an image and HTML image, and the alternative text will be HTML logo. And then we can have some paragraph, but not paragraph, but we can have it. For example, we will have this paragraph, and inside paragraph, we are just going to have some random words. Let me save it, and learning HTML. Let us separate this section with the help of a horizontal rule again. For now, I'm just trying to explain it to you, how a structure should look like. You don't always need a horizontal rule. There are multiple ways to style your website using CSS that we will talk about in some other video. But for now, understand what am I doing. So I have written an article tag, right? And then a h4, and then some image, then a paragraph. We can also, for the image, let me just show you another tag. Let me just remove this image for now, and let's save it, and the image is gone. What I'm going to do is inside this article, after this paragraph, I'm going to insert an image, but I'm not going to use image element directly. I'll use a figure element because it is a semantic element. So I'll say figure. Now inside figure, I'm going to specify my image element, and image element is going to be, of course, our HTML image, and alternate text is going to be HTML logo, right? If you save it, we have it here, and you can notice that there is a bit of difference. You see, this is aligned to the left and this is in center. That's something else that we'll talk about later. We can also have, along with this figure, a figcaption element, and we can caption this, let's say HTML logo. If I save it, it appears here. All right, very simple and small articles. Similarly, we can have a lot of sections on our website. For example, I'll create another section. Now this section, let's say this section holds table elements. We haven't talked about table elements, but I'm just going to write a very simple table tag here. Understand how we create a table element in HTML, how we basically create a table in HTML. So a table tag. Now inside this table, we are going to create table elements. So first is going to be table row, or the first row of our table. Now inside this table row, there will be something called TD, meaning table data. So for example, I'll write here name, and another one I'll write here class, and another one I'll write here score. Now understand, this is the first row. I will write here so that you can see. I'll comment it out, and I'll write first row. Similarly, we want a second row. So I'll write second row, comment it out, and then what we are going to do is write tr, which stands for table row, and inside it some data. Let's say table data, and let's give it some name like John, and then class will be anything, for example 6, and then score can be, I don't know, 20. Similarly, we can create multiple of these. So let me just copy paste it so that you can understand better. A third and a fourth, and let me just comment here also for your, as you can see, we will call it third row, and similarly we will call this one fourth row, so that you can understand using the comments. If I save it and let's go down, as you can see, we have a table. Of course, it doesn't have borders. We need to give it borders using CSS, which I'll show you shortly, but you need to understand this is the basics of how we create a table element in HTML. Right, now let me quickly give it some styling. Now, how can you style is the question. Now, as I told you earlier, HTML is just to give structure to our web page, but we also need CSS to style our web page. Now, we are not going to learn CSS in this video. We will have a separate video for CSS, but for now, just to a little bit design this table, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a little of how to use CSS here. So CSS basically stands for cascading style sheets. So I'll go to top, and here inside our head tag, I'm going to write a new tag. All right, so inside our head tag, I'm going to write a new tag, and this new tag is going to be style tag. So I'll write style, and it will have an opening and a closing tag. Inside style, let's give style. So first thing is I'm going to give style to our body element. Now our body element has everything inside, all the elements, header, headings, HR, sections, and whatnot. Everything is inside this body, right? This is our entire document. So for example, I'll target this body, and for this body, what I am going to do is I am going to say text align center. Now, as the grammar says, text align center means this will center align all the text inside our HTML document. I will save it and let's check. Once I save it, as you can see, some of the texts have been center aligned. Right, these are very simple. We may change a background color also. For example, I'll write some background color, let's say blue. I'll save it, and it doesn't look very pretty, so let's get rid of it and let's try this color. I'll save it, and yeah, a little bit of difference is there. Let me comment. So as you can see, something like this. Now I was talking about, for example, I want to target this image element. So what I'm going to do is very simple. I'll write IMG, the image element, and let's target it by giving it a width. I'll say a width of 200 pixels, save it, and as you can see, the width is now 200 pixels. Another very interesting property is the border radius. For example, I'll talk about, let's say 30 px. If I save it, as you can see, we have rounded corners for images, this one and this one as well. Very simple. We'll talk about CSS in some next video, but I'm just telling you some of the examples here. Now, similarly for this table element, what I am going to do is I'm going to target the table element. Let's go down, and here we have this table element. So I'm going to target this one, and for this table element, let's say I'll give it a width of 300 pixels. I'll save it, and as you can see, the width is increased. Now for the table data, let's go back, and as you can see, we have each table row, right? We have a table rows, and in the table rows we have data, John, class, and then score. So let's target this table data, for example, and I'll write table data, and let's say I'll give it a border. And how do we give border? We will give it a border of 1 pixels, and it is going to be of solid type, right? And it is going to be of color black. I'll save it, and as you can see, they look like tables now. We can also give some other properties. Padding, you will not understand what padding is, so just let it be. But yeah, something like this. I don't think so it's needed, but yeah, as you can see, it just gives space around the element, nothing else. Right, we can also target this table section, but I think it looks better for now. Now after this, we talked about a lot of semantic elements. There are much more semantic elements. For example, another one semantic element that we are going to definitely talk about is going to be the footer element, because it's important. If we go to this website, if we scroll down below, you will see that every website has this footer. which has some links, etc., right? Social icons and this copyright, and then here, right? So almost every website has it, so we are also going to write it. So after this main content, we are going to have another element, we'll call it footer. Right, now inside footer we can have a lot of things. We can have, for example, something like a paragraph, which we will say copyright 2024 my brand or my website, whatever you may call it, my website. I'll save it, and if you go down below, as you can see, we have a footer. Now you may want to quickly know how to have this copyright element here. One way is to just simply copy and paste, but there is another shortcut too. What I'm going to do is, as you can see this copyright element, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write and then copy and then a semicolon. I'll save it, and as you can see, we have this copyright element. This is a quick shortcut that you needed to know. So this was a bit about footer element. We can also separate this one by having a horizontal rule, something like this. So this is a footer element. Now we can also decrease its font size. For example, here I'll go to the head tag, and inside head tag, I'll target my footer element. Okay, now a footer element, I'll just say font size, and let's say 12 pixels. I'll save it, and as you can see, the font size has decreased for this, right? This font size is a CSS property that we'll talk about in the CSS tutorial video. But for now, this is just an example, right? Now, these were some of the basic tags or basic semantic tags in HTML. There are many more tags. For example, for your reference, what I'm going to do is here, I'm just going to have another link. Let's say in this section of about us, here I'll have a link, and I'll say more on semantic tags. And for the link, I'll paste a link for you. Let's save it. And as you can see, more on semantic tags. So if you click on it, as you can see, it refers to a page where we have many more semantic tags. We use the figure, we use the article, we use the now. There is also a side one. There is section that we used. There is a details tag. There is a header element. We also used it. Footer we used, figcaption we used, main we used. There are also summary, and there is also a mark tag, right? So you can also check out this example if you want to know more. All right, let's go back. So this was a little bit about semantic tags in HTML. And we have completed the basics of HTML. If you enjoyed watching this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and also comment down on what you want to learn next. Until then, take care and goodbye.